The next model that we're going to look at is called the prisoner's dilemma. The basic story told here is rather similar in some ways to Bertrand's model. The key similarity, I suppose, is that the firms are going to be setting prices simultaneously. They don't necessarily have to have the same costs and so on. So the model is perhaps a little bit more general than Bertrand's. In its simplest version, which we're going to look at initially, the firm set the price once. And just to have a simple illustration, I'm going to assume that they've only got two choices. They can either choose the monopoly price, in other words, the highest possible price in the market, or they'll choose just something I'll call a low price. You could think of it as a competitive price, but it's at least a price that's significantly lower than the monopoly price. May leave the firms with some profits, but maybe not much. The outcomes of these choices are going to be illustrated in what's called a payoff matrix. So let's have a look at a simple example. So this is called a game. These kind of strategic situations are called games because the whole area of research that investigates these is called game theory. So they're really strategic games. In this case, here we have our two firms, calling them Firm 1 and Firm 2, and here are their choices of strategies, either a low price or a high price. And the key assumption that's being made here is that neither firm knows what the other firm is going to choose. However, what the firms do know is they know the payoffs, or they know the outcomes of each choice. And they know the outcome not only for themselves, but we can also assume that they know it for the other firm. It doesn't do any harm to assume that they have perfect information. Well, let's just run through the information that's being presented here, just so it's quite clear to you what's going on. So you can see that there's four possibilities. Each firm has a choice of two strategies, high price and low price here. So there's four possible combinations of outcomes, because there's four possible combinations of strategies that could be chosen. So each of these rectangles, or I'll call them cells, in the payoff matrix shows us the outcome for each firm given the combination of strategies that the two firms have chosen. So let's just look at a couple of them to make sure we understand what's going on here. So if Firm 1 chooses a low price and Firm 2 also chooses a low price, then this is telling us that Firm 1 gets a payoff of 4 and Firm 2 gets a payoff of 5. You could think of those as levels of profit. On the other hand, if Firm 1 chooses a low price and Firm 2 chooses a high price, we have a different combination of payoffs. Firm 1 gets 60 in that case, Firm 2 gets minus 10. I've just made up these numbers to effectively tell a story. And the story I'm thinking of here is that if Firm 1 chooses a high price, it's going to be left with not very many customers and some high costs, and firm 1 is going to grab most of the market and will make much more profit than would be the case if they both chose the low price. And we see the payoffs for firm 2 as well in these different parts of the cells of the payoff matrix. If firm 1 chooses a high price and if firm 2 charges a low price, then firm 1 is going to suffer losses, and firm 2, charging the low price, is going to grab most of the customers, most of the market, and most of the profit. On the other hand, if both firms charged a high price, we could think of it again as a monopoly price, then they would be both receiving fairly high profits. So, given this situation, given that each firm has to make a choice about which strategy to choose, you have to ask yourself what's going to happen. What price is each firm going to choose in this situation? You might just pause the video at this point and see if you can work it out for yourself. Whether you pause the video or not, I'm going to just walk through the logic. Let's just take it from the point of view of any one of the firms. It doesn't matter whose point of view we take. But let's think about firm 1. Firm 1 is going to ask itself, what should I do? What would be the best strategy for me to choose if firm 2 chooses a low price? If firm 2 chooses a low price, one of these two outcomes is going to happen for firm 1. If firm 1 chooses a low price, it gets a payoff of 4. If it sets the high price, it gets a payoff of -8. Well, obviously, 4 is better than -8. If firm 2 chooses a low price, firm 1 will realize it must choose a low price as well. But firm 1 is going to ask itself, well, what happens if firm 2 chooses a high price? What should I do? Well, again, choosing a low price is the best choice. If firm 1 chooses the low price, it gets a payoff of 60 instead of 45. So firm 1 concludes, no matter what firm 2 does, high price or low price, it's best for me to choose a low price. Well, I'll leave it as an exercise for you to think about it from firm 2's point of view. But you will see that the reasoning is essentially symmetric. The numbers themselves aren't symmetric, but I've set it up so that the logic is the same. So let's summarize what's happened. Both firms have in effect been induced to choose the low price, in the same way that they ended up choosing a low price in the Bertrand equilibrium model. Here's the nature of the dilemma. That's why it's called a dilemma. The firms have the information about what's in the payoff matrix. They know that if somehow they have both chosen a high price, both of them would be better off with that strategy than with this low price strategy. And yet, the logic that I've just gone through has said that they're going to be drawn towards the low price strategy. They can't cooperate with each other, So if each one chooses a price independently, they're going to choose the low price. Now you might think, okay, choosing a price independently like this and having to stick with it, which is what this story is about, is a very unrealistic situation. Well, it's not quite. Later in the course, actually in the last week of the course, we're going to look at some other ways of setting prices. And one way in which a price can be set for a product is to have what's called a sealed bid auction. So that's a situation in which, say, just to carry on with this example, we might have two firms that are bidding for a contract. And the firm that is going to win the contract is the one that offers the lowest price. So if we have an auction in which each firm has to submit a price secretly to the buyer by a certain date, and all of the offers that are received by that date are going to be then compared, the firms will be under an incentive to offer a low price so as to win the contract. Well, we'll have a closer look at that in a few weeks, but that situation is actually rather similar to the prisoner's dilemma, and obviously good from the buyer's point of view in that particular case. So if these firms were selling to customers, the customers would be happy that the firms were setting a low price instead of somehow cooperating to set a high price. So what's being assumed here is that collusion between the firms, that is, getting together and making a binding agreement to set a high price, is not possible. However, in some future slides, we're going to look at a story in which perhaps we can relax the restrictive story that we've got here about the prisoner's dilemma, where the firms just get to choose the price once, to consider a more realistic situation in which firms can adjust their prices based on what the other firm has been doing. Anyway, that concludes my presentation of the prisoner's dilemma. We'll now go on to consider somewhat more complicated stories.